Nohoi Na'in Jinji Sho Adili. This means good to see all of you, and that's in Gwich'in, my language. I am Cathy Almost. I'm from the Gwich'in Tribal Council in the Fort McPherson Northwest Territory. I am Cree. I am also part of the Northwest Territory Métis Association, and I have Scottish in my background. My father went to residential school. My mother went to Indian day school. I am a cancer survivor. I am a mother of 2 babies in heaven. I am a musician. I'm a wife. I'm an auntie. I'm a cousin, and I'm a beater. I also work as an engagement leader with the Patient and Public Engagement team at the BC Patient Safety Equality Council. And I'm privileged to be working and presenting and living on the unceded traditional territory of the Gitxaala Sioux and Kitsum-Kalem people from the Tsimshian Nation, also known as Terrace. You can see on the far right side the beautiful mountains that I have the privilege of being close to and living on the land. And then I just wanted to acknowledge my background too. Michelle Stoney is the Gitxsan artist who developed this artwork and gave me permission to use it as my Zoom background. So I just want to give her a great masicho and thank you for allowing me to do that. I will turn things over to Tina to introduce herself.
Thank you, Cathy. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tina Miller. My maiden name is Edwards. My mother is Tilly Annie Angus from the Nisga'a Nation, the village of Laklazap, and we are in the Ganada tribe, from the house Wilp High Mass. My father is Sidney George Edwards, who is from Ontario, and he's a non-native man. My mother went to day school in Port Alberni at the same time as her 2 sisters were attending the residential school in Port Alberni. My mother passed away in April 2004 from HIV/AIDS. My father was given up at 6 months old and grew up in the system. My father got custody of me and my little brother when I was about 9 years old, and he passed away in June of 2005. I'm a single mother of 4 children and have been for 20 years. I'm a dog mom, a poet, a sister, and an auntie, and a Gigi to 1.5 grandsons. I am a training and education coordinator with the BC First Nations Justice Council, and I'm also a residential worker at an emergency shelter in Kelowna. I am privileged to be currently working and presenting from the unceded territory of the Syilx Nation in Kelowna, BC, which is along Okanagan Lake, and that's my picture in the middle there. I'll pass it over to Hélène now.
Thank you, Cathy and Tina. Bonjour, excuse-moi, j'espère que vous allez bien. My name is Hélène Campbell. I'm a white settler with a Scottish and French background. I'm a 2-time double lung transplant recipient. I call myself a French-Canadian double-double. I'm also a dog mom. I think I'm the cool aunt. I'm a motivational speaker and a musician. And one thing that's unique about me is that I used to play the bagpipes. And it's ironic that I did because I had the worst lung function. So it's just funny how life takes us on these adventures. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm living and presenting from the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The land here is beautiful. It's the Tulip Festival in Ottawa. It's my favorite time of the year. They're my favorite flowers. And I'm surrounded by so many beautiful paths and trails. And the weather has been amazing the past few days, and I can't express how grateful I am to be here. I'm the passionate patient partner that works with the Health Standards Organization as an engagement and partnership lead. And our aim at Health Standards Organization is to have meaningful, purposeful, and effective engagement with patients and families and residents. We're still learning what real engagement looks like and how to build trust with patient partners and what it really means to partner with people. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here today. I'm so grateful and so fortunate to have this time with you guys. So thank you. Back to you, Cathy.
Thanks, Hélène. So we got together and we were thinking about doing a presentation, and then we saw this conference. And so what we all have in common is we all work in the health system in some way. And so that's, as you can notice, we're presenting from two different parts in BC and from Ontario. And so we just wanted to talk and have a little kitchen table with you today about our learnings that we've learned from virtual engagement in the past year and what that's looked like. We've talked about creating a safer space. And the interesting thing about trying to create a virtual safer space is that we want to make a space online where people can express themselves honestly and express their attitudes and not having any fear of ridicule. The challenge of creating a safer space is that we can't contain the environment. We can state our intentions or what we're hoping to achieve, but it really is up to the participants as to whether the space is safe or not. There is an article we wanted to just highlight in the chat box from the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, and it talks about what does it look like to create a safe space. So we're going to put resources in the chat box as we present, and feel free to go to those links so that you can look at them later on. But we just want to talk about that this is a safe space. We hope you feel that it is safe and that you feel free to contribute as you wish in the chat box, ask us questions, any kind of interaction we're welcoming, and feel free to laugh and enjoy with us for the next hour. We want to talk about what cultural safety is. And recently there was a paper that was written by Mary-Ellen Turpin-Lafond. She is a lawyer here in British Columbia, and it's called the In Plain Sight Report. And we'll put that in the chat box as well, the link to the report. It's about a 200-page document, but it's trying to address Indigenous-specific racism and discrimination in healthcare. And it was released in November of 2020. And we just wanted to define cultural safety. So a culturally safe environment can only be defined by the Indigenous person receiving the care. It does not profile, does not discriminate against the Indigenous person, but the care that is experienced is respectful, is safe, and allows for meaningful communication and service. So it's totally at the Indigenous person can say whether they're receiving culturally safe care. I know in BC that this is a goal, and this is something that needs to improve, I'm sure, across Canada, as we've seen different things in the news like Joyce and the different that I'm sure you're more than well aware of. We've tried to do this through the BC Patient Safety Quality Council, and I've had the privilege over the last 8 years of working in healthcare and working with different nations. We actually have 57 different nations in the northern part of British Columbia. And these are just some of my amazing people that I've been able to get to know. And I've been on my own journey of self-identification for the last 13 years. Yeah, you can just see some different parts of northern British Columbia. And as part of my job, what I do is I go into Indigenous communities and just try to get to know them. Well, when I first started my job, I decided that I was going to go up to the Nisga'a lands. And with the Nisga'a lands, I was going to go and I was going to give a presentation. This is the beautiful Nisga'a land here. And so I had an elder with me, so I was pretty set that I was all good. And I brought a fruit basket, so I put together a bunch of fruit, and I was set. I was going to go in and talk about what it was like to be part of the Patient Voices Network. And I hope you're all smiling because you're realizing that I'm already approaching this in a very wrong way. And so later I found out that I was like a bird overhead, flying over, crapping down information and flying away. I had no context. I didn't have any relationship. I was just going in, and that is not the way to do things. I actually did have a couple members of the Patient Voices Network before I started my job. Cherie and Millie, and then one other up in the Nisga'a were part of the Patient Voices Network, but I didn't contact them to say, hey, I'm coming, I'm going to come and see you. I just went in cold. And later I learned just how that was just not the right approach. I had a wonderful mentor, Verna Howard from Gitsagukala and the Gitsan, she talked to me for like 2 hours on the phone. She's like, Cathy, it's all about relationships. You got to go in and you got to get to know somebody and you got to build that relationship. And you've got to spend the time to understand and learn about the culture of the people whose land you're on. And I have had the privilege of being able to do that up until last year. Last year, as you know, we couldn't go anywhere. So suddenly I wasn't able to hop in the car and go to different places like I had been. The Patient Voices Network actually has about 1,300 people across the province of British Columbia. About 100 of those are Indigenous patient partners. And Tina is one of those Indigenous patient partners, and that's, again, part of our relationship. But, you know, COVID hit, and suddenly everybody's scrambling for, like, well, what can we do? And you'll see that there's a great document here that we also want to put into the chat box. It's about cultural safety mindfulness during a pandemic, and what does that look like? So feel free to spread that as you see fit, or if it's helpful to you. At the point of COVID, we were starting to build a relationship with First Nations Health Authority. And we were wanting to get together people from across the province and have a meeting. And so I said to my colleague there, what should we do? And he's like, well, let's see if they'll come online. So we were actually fortunate enough to recruit. So this is a map of British Columbia. This is Haida Gwaii. This is Vancouver Island. And this is where I'm located. And this is the Nisga'a land that I was talking about. It's about an hour away from Terrace. And then we have someone from the Kamloops area, and somebody from Chilliwack, and somebody from Vancouver, and somebody in Comox. So we were able to recruit patient partners. And I should say that back when we only had 3 at the beginning, 8 years ago, we now have 53 in the north, and then the rest are scattered amongst the rest of the province. So I learned my lesson about relationship building, and I've been able to build relationships. And because of those awesome relationships, I was able to reach out across the province and meet with these 5 Indigenous patient partners and the member of First Nations Health Authority. We actually met once a month, and we had a 91% attendance rate because everybody liked these meetings so much, and it was good medicine for us to get together. We had a chance to meet each other and talk about COVID-19 and how people were doing and what was happening. This is the Indigenous inclusion group I was talking about. So it was really timely for us to be able to talk. And the reason why we got together is we wanted to talk about, is the Patient Voices Network culturally safe, and are the practices that we're doing culturally safe practices? So we were able to get 3 GGs online, which was a huge accomplishment, and of course with help from their family members, and they were able to come, and then it's just been a really amazing group. And from that group, they said, you know, I go to these patient engagement opportunities with the healthcare system, and I'm the only Indigenous patient partner. Are there any other Indigenous patient partners in the network? And I'm like, yeah, there are. And we decided that it would be really culturally appropriate to have a meeting. So we put a call out to all the Indigenous connections that we had in the north, about 84, and we had 6 people come to an all nations meeting on June the 17th. And at that meeting, we just talked about all the amazing ways that we're making change happen in the system. Across Canada and in British Columbia, we had a Gitxsan hereditary chief there, and Dwayne is working with Elaine in health standards, and Cherie. I just wanted to also talk about Cherie for a moment. So Cherie and I have become really good friends. I want to highlight my earrings for you. She designed these. She's an amazing designer, and she designed them for me because she said, you know, Cathy, you talk about being a bird flying overhead and crapping down information, but you've changed. You understand now the importance of relationships. So you're like a bird, you're like a raven who has landed. And so that was just a huge honor and compliment for her to design these earrings for me. And we've had a really great opportunity to get to know each other. She actually came to Baltimore with me to present at the International Patient and Family Centered Care Conference. She brought her whole family. It was a really amazing thing. This was back when we could travel in, I think it was 2018, we were able to go to Baltimore. So we had an all nations meeting. We got people together. And then during COVID, just this last month, we wanted to invite people from across the province. And that's actually how I got to know Tina. I had a chance to ask people to RSVP and to respond to my invitation. And Tina responded. And so I saw that she was Nisga'a, and I'm like, Tina's Nisga'a, and I don't know her. I've learned my lesson. I picked up the phone and I was like, hey, Tina, I'm Cathy. Who are you? And so we had this awesome connection. And she was talking about her Nana And I said, who's your Nana? And she told me her Nana's name. And I'm like, I totally know your Nana. She's in Terrace and she lives like 2 blocks away from me. And so it was just a really cool opportunity, even though Tina's in Kelowna, for me to know one of her family members and for us to get to know each other. And that's where this presentation came from, because we've all learned different things about cultural safety. And that's what's happened through my last 8 years of my experience, is I've had a chance to just learn a bunch of different lessons from the people that have been generous enough to share their time with me and to talk. So one thing that I've learned is the importance of being human. We have to sit in meetings in Zoom. And it was so funny. Joseph Rohn was talking about this last night at the meeting session. I don't know if any of you were able to make that, but he was talking about how somehow we've forgotten how to be human. And it's totally the truth. You know, even though we're in an online virtual meeting, it doesn't mean we can't take a moment to just allow people to take a breath. So I'm realizing that there was one thing I wanted to do at the start of this meeting that I didn't do. And I'm going to do it right now. I want to acknowledge the loss that some of you may have had, that has happened across the world, and that has happened because of COVID-19. So I just want to take a moment of silence, if that's okay with you, to acknowledge the loss that people have experienced in COVID-19, whether they have died because of the virus itself, or whether you've lost somebody during this time. It's not an easy time at all for all of us. It's very difficult. So let's just take a moment of silence. So as we come back together, let's just take a big breath, a deep breath. And one more. This is all part of being human. It's identifying the losses that we've all experienced together, and being kind to one another and being kind to ourselves, and taking a breath. So I'd encourage you to somehow start your meetings even just a little bit early, and just have a little bit of time to just chat and to check in with each other. Is how are you doing? As you've seen through my other lessons, I've tried to learn to give enough time for relationship building, and I've learned how to situate myself and talk about my background. And the Indigenous way of doing that is so cool. It is so cool to self-locate yourself and talk about who you are as an individual versus just your business card and just what you do. It is so amazing, and it's so much deeper, because now you know a little bit more about the three of us, even as we've introduced ourselves. Space in a meeting. You know, I was on this Indigenous Cultural Safety and Community meeting, and we were meeting virtually, and everything was timed down to the last minute. And so there was this pressure and this sort of, you felt this angst if it was getting into the time of the next thing. So I said, you know, could we take the times off the agenda so that, you know, we can talk about however long it takes for the important conversation? That's pretty important. And then I've learned about picking up the phone and building relationships. I've learned to give my participants enough information ahead of time. I've learned that trust and self-awareness, so having a health experience go wrong, understanding your part or what that has meant to you and processing that, and the acceptance not of what happened, that it was okay, but just the acceptance that it did happen, and being able to then communicate it, is how you make system change, that this is really a process that we need to go through in order to talk about our difficult health experiences. And I've learned that laughing together is good medicine. You saw in the picture, Sheila had her reindeer ears, and she sang to us in Secwepemc at our Christmas party. It was so amazing. So just having some lighter moments is super helpful. I'm going to turn things over to Tina. So as I said, Tina and I know each other, and we've only known each other really for a month now, even though she's been part of the Patient Voices Network for a lot longer than that. Tina has worked with the Health Standards Organization, and she'll get into a little bit more detail about that. But Tina, I'll let you take over the floor.
Thank you so much, Cathy. Here are my beautiful children on the left there. They're all fairly grown. There's one grandson. The 0.5 grandson will be due and born around June 15th. I became a volunteer with the Patient Voices Network in 2016. In September of 2016, one of my daughters tried to take her life. 6 months prior to that, we did our best to get her the help that she needed, and we fell through the cracks. Referrals weren't, they take forever. So I was in school for my bachelor's, and one of my professors, who I informed I had to take some time off from school to attend because my daughter was in the hospital, they let me know about an opportunity that was coming up with the Patient Voices Network about sharing Indigenous lived experience within the healthcare system at a center here in Kelowna. I stepped out of my comfort zone, and I volunteered to share my story and experience in how to make places more culturally safe, especially with Indigenous people. And after that, I was given an opportunity to attend a quality forum in early 2017. And at that quality forum, I met Alyssa Bryan, who works with the Health Standard Organization. On the left picture there is a group, like the technical committee that I'm on with the Mental Health and Addictions Technical Committee. On the right, that's the governance roundtable I just joined in December. But I also volunteer with the Health Standards Organization on the ICE initiative, which is Improving Integrated Care for Youth. And that project meant a lot to me because of what happened with my daughter and how we got lost in the system. And I just wanted to improve my children's experience, and not only theirs, but other people's experience within the healthcare system, because there's so many gaps and room for in improvement. Excuse me. And during my time with HSO, I always felt respected by them. I felt heard, I felt listened to. They heard what I had to say, and they took that into consideration, and it popped up in the standards and things like that. And with ICE, I'm on the technical committee, the oversight committee, and a working group, and that's just what I just want to improve the healthcare system. Forgive me. And outside of that, I felt valued as a person with the Health Standards Organization. I didn't feel like I was the token Indigenous person within the group, and I wasn't there just to be a check marked off on what they had to do. And through there, Hélène came in at one point. Before COVID hit, we had in-person meetings like every 4 months, I think it was. And Hélène came in and shared her story. So I'll let her carry on here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina, and thank you so much, Cathy. And I just want to take a minute to acknowledge and really thank you for that taking that breath. And for someone who's lost function in her lungs, I really, really know the importance of taking a good breath and how we take that stuff for granted. And so just really want everybody to take another deep breath. And I just want to I love to extend my gratitude to my donor families, because every other breath I've had is because of them. And when I think about what organ donation is, it's taking a really terrible situation, and someone is making a decision to turn a terrible situation into something beautiful, something broken, and turning it into this incredible new beginning. And when I think about what engaging patient partners or family members looks like, it's taking a negative situation and trying to improve it for others and trying to make the best out of it. And there's this expression I love to say, it's you're the CEO of you. I'm the CEO of me. My colleague with Health Standards Organization, her name is Heather, and she loves to say, nothing about me without me. Our voices matter. it's so important to be engaged. And I, as a patient, realized how important it was to be engaged in my care, but I also then began to get engaged in research, because it's important that when we're developing research or care or anything, that there are no faulty assumptions being made. And so I actually started working with the Health Standards Organization as the patient engagement lead. And my job is to build relationships. That's what I do. It is the best job ever. I am constantly learning from so many people. I am constantly on this journey of improvement, of growth, I'm just humbled by the experiences I have. And a lot of my role is to recruit and outreach to patient partners and family members that have lived experience pertaining to whatever the subject matter is that we're developing a standard about. And so I came in and did a presentation about the language that we use in standards, how important it is to be inclusive of patients and families, and that patients and families need to be seen as members and important members of the team. And I think that's when I met Tina, as I came in and did a presentation to this technical committee about thinking about the language we use, the inclusive language. And that's the concept of people-centered care. We can go to the next slide. And maybe 2 slides over. Yeah, so with the Health Standards Organization and Accreditation Canada, its affiliate, we have made a commitment to improving our growth and truth and reconciliation and growing as an organization. And we have started a Truth and Reconciliation Learning Circle, 92.3. And the second meeting we had together, this agreement was co-designed with everybody. Someone brought this agreement to the table and asked for our feedback and asked us to kind of talk about what it meant to us and if there's anything that stood out to us in particular. And, for me, I really love the idea of trying it on, being willing to try on new ideas or ways of doing things that might not be what you prefer or are familiar with, and agree to remain open and engaged despite experiencing discomfort. And that's part of my process in learning. Be in a position to say, this is what I've learned. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Engagement is about building relationships, authentic relationships. So lessons learned. I've learned a lot of things. Like I said, it's about relationships and looking after each other, which is the theme of this conference. It's all about taking care of one another. And that's what building an engagement looks like. We want to give people the time that they need, allowing them to have the space that they need to speak and express themselves. And a lot of this we've kind of talked about already. Tina and Cathy have brought this up, but regular check-ins. Every time you meet, asking people where they're at, because we're all on this journey. We're all living things, experiencing highs and lows, and from week to week things change. And so it's important to do that regular check-in, to acknowledge the land and speak about it, but think about why we're doing land acknowledgement, not just doing it to tick a box. What is the meaning for it? And acknowledge that where you are is beautiful and you're so fortunate to be where you are. And it's opened my eyes to just the beauty that surrounds us and how I'm learning so much. This other one here is that people can sense when you're genuine, and it leads to a conversation that's more authentic and transparent when you're being honest and open. This idea of the passing circle, with COVID, things have changed, and I know one of the steps that we wanted to take was focus on the in-person connection when we were trying to grow and build our engagement processes, but we can't do that. And so this passing circle online visual is to have a PowerPoint slide up with a circle and different seats, and to pass the rock on to different seats as people are speaking. We go in alphabetical order, and to share that is a visual passing circle. So it's not the same, but you still get that feeling of being together, and having that visual really helps people feel connected. Now, the importance of sharing a meal, it's so important to do that. We had a call with one of our patient partners who expressed to me, you know what, let's just have food together on this call. And I loved it. It was fantastic. And it was so important to kind of take everything away and just have experience that normal human like sharing a meal together, even though it was virtual. And the last thing is that being virtually engaging can be really, really draining. And I'm sure you know these can be long days, and we want to be respectful and mindful of the time that we're asking of people. And so to on that note, I'd love to give it back to Cathy, and just really again thank you all for joining us for what we've been speaking about today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hélène and Tina. So good to hear about what you've learned and what it's been like for you to be online. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We did put up just the link to the Health Standards Organization in case you're curious what that organization looks like that both Hélène and Tina are connected to. As we are waiting for questions, we will move on to You're on Mute. We just, when we were chatting, we're like, there's some funny things that have happened to us in virtual meetings. And so let's just talk about them and let's just be transparent about, you know, we've showed you this sort of perfect, in a perfect world in our virtual meetings, blah, 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 sort of perfect, not really, but, you know, but this is just really what's happened over the last year as we have been in community in a virtual way. Anybody want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can start. You know, sure. Just the title of this slide, "You're on Mute," is probably the top sentence I've heard in 2020 and 2021 as well. Those three words, I've heard them so often, and I think a lot of us have we can resonate with that. I have a dog, and sometimes, well, most of the time, my dog has something to say, and so the pet interruptions. Cathy, don't you have a cat?
Yeah, I have a cat, and it never fails. Anytime I'm in an important meeting, that's exactly when she wants my full attention and to go outside. She's fine like 5 minutes before the meeting, but as soon as I'm talking and supposed to present, I'm surprised she hasn't bugged me already. If she makes an appearance, I'll bring her up. But yeah, it's just one of those things that goes on when you least expect it. You have to just go with pet interruptions. And I think did you have a frozen screen, Tina? Was it you?
Yes, it was me. It happens often. Oh, sorry. There's a pet interruption of my dog shaking his collar. And also, it's so odd. Today, there are contractors downstairs in the basement suite putting up drywall. So I'm so thankful there's a mute that you guys don't have to hear that going on in the background. But yes, I do get frozen screens a lot. And the toddlers. One time my grandson was here and I was on a meeting with HSO and it was breakfast time, our time. And he decided to bring his breakfast and sit on my lap and eat while I was in the meeting, which was fun. He was a cute little addition.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Cathy. Sorry.
I'm just going to say one of the funniest things that has happened to me is I was on a meeting and the lady had to go and pick up her son from daycare. And so I could see somehow she got her camera and she put it on her bike and we could see her like biking. We could see her perfectly and she's biking as she's sort of still in the Zoom meeting. So that was one of the funniest meetings that I've attended. Go ahead, Hélène.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, people have come up with creative ways also to feel connected through this. And one of the points here is the basket exchange. Someone was sharing with me that kind of there was this anonymous, you could sign up for this anonymous basket exchange with people you didn't know, and you were assigned a name and you were given an address. And you got to deliver a basket, and you would receive a basket from someone with food in it, wine, a ton of different things. And one of the patient partners told me about this, and I thought that was an incredible way for people to stay connected through this virtually. And the reach was larger because of this online virtual world that we're living in. And you know that we can be more inclusive now. The reach is bigger. And I have friends that I met when I was in Barcelona 10 years ago that I hadn't spoken to in years. And when COVID happened, we started to Zoom and catch up. And we could have been doing that all along. But I don't know, there's something that COVID brought out that, you know, let's reconnect virtually. The world just got bigger in a way. It felt smaller too as we were isolated, but we also did grow in different ways.
Yeah, I actually have family that lives in Ontario and family that lives down in the Lower Mainland, and then I'm up here in Terrace. And one of the cool things we've been able to do is get together as and Zoom. My in-laws are 78 and 80, and yes, we were successful in getting them onto Zoom. They were the most challenging. And then we also tried to encourage one family to sort of split up a little bit. The Wi-Fi was a bit shaky, but we had a themed meeting. That's one thing that I really like to do, is to plan a purposeful, meaningful gathering that has an intention. And so when we got together, we had the theme of imagination. And so it started off by saying, so when you were a child, how did you use your imagination? And so as children, of course, we all have stories of different things that we did. I actually had an imaginary friend, was called the friend. And so we talked about our imagination. And after we answered that question, we were in breakout groups, then we came back and then we talked about that. And then we went back into the breakout groups and we talked about how are you using your imagination now? Because I love the possibilities of imagination and just how all the things that can make us think about. And people talked about they were or they weren't using their imagination. And since then, my 25-year-old nephew has bought a guitar, and he took apart the whole guitar and he's painted it and he's put it back together. And I said, he said to me, Aunt Cathy, I would never have done that if we hadn't have talked about imagination. And you got me thinking about things I could do during COVID to use my imagination, because that is something we all have. So he was keen on that, and that's just one way that he's using his imagination as a 25-year-old. Tina, you were going to talk about that show that you like to watch.
New Amsterdam. I'm not sure if any of you have seen it. My youngest got me into it just like a month or two ago, and I was watching it one evening in season 1, episode 14, I believe. Vijay Kapoor is one of the doctors, and he does his practice of working with patients differently. So in this episode, the new emergency department manager told all the doctors, you have 10 minutes to meet, diagnose, and send off the patients. Well, Vijay wasn't having any of that, and there was one lady who came in, and he wanted to get to know her better, but his manager kept telling him, you only have 10 minutes. So then other doctors started giving him their 10 minutes so he could sit there, spend time, get to know this woman. He learned within the last couple of weeks, just by sitting there and talking with her, that she went fly fishing with her family. And so anyway, she ended up with Lyme disease, but he was able to diagnose it. It took a little longer, but he listened to her. He didn't just say, what are your symptoms, and try to give her some medicine or even just guess, but he learned more about her.
Yeah.
And I just really like that. It's like a reciprocal relationship, right? Where you're both talking, you're discussing. It's not just what brought you in, but you look at the person as a whole person, what they've done in their life. And recently, not just that day or the day before, but recently he went back and found out within the last 2 weeks what she did. So that means a lot to me when people do that. You sit and get to know them and learn more, and not just the surface part.
Yeah, what matters to you actually is an interesting question. And that's exactly what Dr. Kapoor, I saw that episode. I love New Amsterdam. I think he's so innovative, which I just wish we could do some of those things with the hospital. But that what matters to you question is something that's an international thing. It's June 9th, International What Matters to You Day. And at the council, we're actually hosting a meeting. We are inviting 13 white settlers from the health authorities to come and be witnesses as our Indigenous patient partners have a discussion about what matters to them in feeling culturally safe at a patient engagement opportunity. So this is slightly different than point of care. It's not when you're going to see your doctor what makes you feel safe. It's when you're asked your opinion about how to make diabetes improvements better, or when you ask your opinion about how to create a standard at an organization like HSO. What do you need from the organizers to help make you feel culturally safe in that space, in that virtual space, I'm pretty sure is what's going to happen. So we're super excited about this. We have 13 patients partners who have signed up for this meeting, and we have 13 healthcare partners coming. We're prepping the healthcare partners because one thing I've heard really loud and clear from my Gitsan hereditary elder, he's like, Cathy, there's something called translation exhaustion. We're so tired of always trying to educate the healthcare system about what it means to be Indigenous. The healthcare system needs to take some responsibility themselves and do some learning about whose land they're on and what are the cultural practices, and they need to take that on as their own ownership. And so we're going to teach about that at the pre-meeting. And then we've invited them to be witnesses of this event, not to participate because we want it to be a safe environment for the participants to say what they need to say. And so we're super excited about that. We're going to develop a resource out of it that talks about what does it look like for patient engagement to be culturally safe.
One of my all-time favorite things, actually, it has to do with what matters to you. There should be a shift in care where we stop asking what's the matter with you and asking what matters to you. And I love that so much. It's looking at the individual as a whole, as a human being, not as a number, as a diagnosis. And I just love that image of, no, it's not about what's the matter with you. It's what matters to you as an individual, your care plan, what's important to you. You know, like after going through my transplant, and I met a lot of people who were experiencing the same thing. And for some people, they really wanted to run again. It was a goal for them, you know, to be able to run again. My goal was to be able to make it to my sister's wedding. And that's what mattered to me. So we did a care plan that was catered to what I was hoping to do and what I wanted to achieve. And that's what mattered to me. And it was just real. And I felt empowered in a way because it was about how I felt. It wasn't a decision they made. It was based on how I was wanting to live. So yeah, just a quick little story there. I see some things coming in the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that. So please also, Tina and Elaine, feel free to talk about this. We strive really hard through the Patient Voices Network to have a safe platform where people can talk about the difficult things that have happened. There is the Patient Complaints Office in BC. I don't know if you have that in other provinces, but there's a place if you want to elevate your concern because something has happened that was wrong to you and you want to lodge a formal complaint, there's a Patient Care Quality Office. The Patient Voices Network is an opportunity to try to make the system better for the greater good. And that's what came out from these Indigenous cultural virtual meetings that I've had. We called the second one For the Greater Good on purpose because the Gitsan elder said, we were made for this as Indigenous people. We were made to make change and make things better because we understand the value of contributing to our community and making things better for the greater good and for our children and for the public. So that is sort of how we've tried to frame it. And it comes back to those statements that I made about knowing what's happened and then having sort of some self-awareness about yourself, because there isn't really a platform to talk about the difficult things that have happened to you in the health system. And that might be what you're talking about. And I've actually had some difficulties happen to me in the health system where I've gone back to the physician and been like, hey, did you know that this happened? And so sometimes that's the best place to start, but I know there's a power indifference and that makes people uncomfortable because that's your doctor. So you have to feel confident or comfortable in your way of communicating it. And I hope and I know that often we want to communicate it so it doesn't have to happen to somebody else. And that's why people become part of the Patient Voices Network, because they want what happened to them to not happen to somebody else. Tina or Elaine, did you want to take a stab at that question? And feel free to ask if we're not hitting what you're asking. Feel free to explain a little bit more, but that's sort of how I see that question.
I'll let you go, Tina. I've been talking a lot.
I was just going to ask to clarify if the, at Suko, I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, if your question is in regard to the healthcare system or in general about speaking up and like the risk of opening up and stepping into something. I just wanted that to be clarified first before trying to answer that.
Just as we're waiting for clarity, maybe we'll I think there's a couple other points. We did also talk about the fact that COVID has opened up video meetings, right? I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember the Jetsons, but do you remember the Jetsons where she was talking on her screen? No, actually the phone rang and she went over to the screen and then she took her already made up head and she was like in her house coat and she looked bags under her eyes. And so she put on her already made head with all her makeup on and then answered the phone and was like, hello. And I was thinking as a child, oh, that'll never happen. And here we are, you don't put your camera on if you're in your house coat. We don't have the head that we can pull over our heads, but isn't it crazy that we can see each other and talk? But yeah, Atsuko, feel free to expand in the chat, or, oh, it looks like you might have answered. Both cases are great. I just feel it's often you put yourself in a vulnerable situation and it takes a lot of effort and courage to start a conversation. So go ahead, Tina, you can, if you wanted to respond.
It does. I agree. It takes a lot of effort and courage. And I'll share an experience I had recently. It's not necessarily with the healthcare system, but it was with one of my employers. And I wanted to have a difficult conversation. And before that, I asked if we could have a safe space, and where I'm coming from is not malicious. I would just like to talk. And they were open to that. And for me, and one of my professors in school, one thing he always said, if you ever wonder about something, you just ask and you present it. I don't know about what you've stepped into and what you did not intend to, and that does happen. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. So if Hélène, would you like to take over and pick up? That would be great.
So one of the things that I learned last year, there was a webinar that we did with Mary Lee. She's the CEO of the Canadian Indigenous Nurses Association. And Kimberly, she's, I think, the executive director at the Institute for, I can't remember, something health research, I should know, and Alyssa Bryan, who is the program manager that works with health standards and was working on the cultural safety and humility standard. And one of the things that they said was get comfortable with being uncomfortable. She noted that often Indigenous community members feel like outsiders. And if we were going to prepare a way to engage, we as a non-Indigenous community member should get used to feeling that way as well. And I remember Ali said that when she began working with Health Standards Organization, she realized that engaging with Indigenous communities is an ongoing learning process. And if you're ready to engage, you're ready to have a long-lasting relationship, and it's an ongoing learning path. And I think something I've learned through this as well is sometimes you might be afraid to ask a question. You may be afraid, but if you don't ask the question, you'll never know. And if it's inappropriate, you ask for feedback and ask them to let you know how, am I doing this wrong? What can I do? How should I have approached this? And so it really is developing a relationship where it's hard to build that trust, but the only way to really get there is to have those conversations, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
That's really good. I also put just a comment in the chat about something that I've learned from an elder. She was with her grandson and they were receiving racist care actually. And so she said, I'm just trying to get some culturally safe care here. And all of a sudden she said she could see the nurse's eyes get big because she was just realizing that she wasn't being kind. She wasn't being respectful. She wasn't treating them in a good way. And so if you're in that situation, those words might help you. We wanted to give you a chance to give us feedback or to participate. Do you have any ideas for us in order to have cultural safety in a virtual meeting? What else are you thinking? So if you want to type something into the chat of what you're thinking about that, we would love to hear your ideas of how do you have cultural safety in a virtual meeting? Are there things that we haven't talked about? Are there things that you've thought about? We'd love to see your comments in the chat. So we'll give you a moment to do that. I know we're just about wrapping up here, but curious about your thoughts about cultural safety and what that might look like for you, or ways that we haven't talked about. And I think that I love what Hélène just said about learning. It is a journey all of us are on, and the older you get, the more you know nothing about nothing. And so that is the truth as I am on this journey as well of learning. And if you can keep your mind open to being teachable and to learning things, it's a great journey, because then you don't know it all and you are constantly learning and taking the opportunities that the creator brings to you of learning things, and the great relationships that you get to be and make with people who can teach you and help you and be your friend. That relationships, it just all comes back to that for me. Any last words, Tina or Elaine?
I just wanted to say that, you know, the saving grace for me in all this has really been nature, being able to go outside on walks, experience that. And I had a conversation with Dwayne, a patient partner, and he explained to me, you know, you need to see a walk outside like you're taking a pill, like it's medicine. And I love that so much. It is so therapeutic, and it's calming, and it works miracles. I find, like going outside, going for walks, being by the trees, being by the water. That's kind of been my saving grace through all of this, that experience of being able to connect outside. Sorry, I'm coughing a lot.
No problem. We hope you get better. Tina, anything you wanted to add to that, or are you good?
I feel the same way outside. Water is what calms me the most. And reading a good book as well, just to relax and take those breaths, Cathy. Oh, and I have breathe tattooed here. I don't know if you can see it, but that's my constant reminder to breathe. And it does really help. It does help. And just getting out in that air, because we're all isolated. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Yeah!